Central Europe, northern Lower Saxony. Spring work in a heather skep apiary. In the region of cultivated heathland between Bremen and Hamburg, in Langenfelder near Sittensen, lies the farmstead of the head beekeeper Georg Klintwort. His speciality is skep beekeeping. A large skep stand is directly adjacent to the house, the L-shaped home apiary with space for 270 skeps. This is where the majority of the standing stocks spend the winter. Its orientation to the east and the south provides them with a maximum of sunshine. During the winter, the entrances of the skeps are shaded from the sun to prevent the bees being tempted out too early in the year. In March, if the weather promises to stay warm, the beekeepers remove the sunshades. Now it is time for the cleansing flight, during which the bees rid themselves of the excreta from their winter feed. The large-scale beekeeper also needs several big outstands for his 700 winter stocks. They are located on the periphery of the cultivated land, close to the virgin moorland with its sprinkling of birch, alder and willow trees. Closest to the farm is the outstand near Marschhorst. Its rectangular closed construction provides the skeps with a maximum of protection against wind and weather. Many of the beekeepers' seasonal tasks are performed in this rectangular space. Access to the isolated winter stands is usually quite difficult. The single stand in woodland cover near Twistenbostel is also oriented to face the sun. Care is taken that the bees are able to fly straight out and find dry resting places on the grass in front of the skeps. They have the necessary water supply close at hand. The first spring feeding is provided by hazel, willow and alder close to the winter stands. At this third large winter stand near Alpershausen, in the warm sun, the bees are now busily collecting pollen and water to help build up the brood nest. By mid-April, it's time for Georg Klintwort to prepare the skeps for the spring migration. In doing so, he takes the opportunity of inspecting the stocks to assess their condition. No beekeeper is ever without a smoker. The smoke from the smouldering tansy subdues the bees which are already actively tending their brood. Covering cloths made from gauze or curtain netting are used to seal off the mouth of the skep during transport. They are bee-tight while allowing air to circulate. The entrances stay open until evening to allow the bees to forage freely. The cloth must not come loose during the long journey. To keep it tight, the corners are twisted up before they are fastened. On the shelves, beneath each skep, wax covers gnawed off the food cells and dead bees have been collecting throughout the winter. To the beekeeper, this debris is an indicator of the remaining food supplies in the skep and the population of the stock. The fact that the bees have built on to the dark old combs at the bottom of the skep to enlarge the brood nest tells the beekeeper that there is a good queen inside. While inspecting and preparing his stocks, the beekeeper is assisted by another beekeeper and an apprentice. The colonies that have been assembled at only a few stands for overwintering are now going to be transported in small batches to better nectar and pollen yielding areas. The majority of them, including the best stocks, are to be set up in the Alter Land. This extensive fruit-growing area between Stade and Hamburg to the south of the Elbe is the preferred spring migration place for the heathland beekeepers. To the back of the large Altländer farmhouses, the orchards of the fruit growers extend over a large area. In groups of up to 20 skeps, or singly, the winter stocks are now distributed on small migration stands. The skeps are put out immediately on arrival in the early morning. Before continuing his journey to the next migration stand, the beekeeper opens the flight entrance, which has been stuffed with moss or grass for transportation. This allows the bees, as soon as they have arrived at the new site, to set out on their first orientation flight. The same day, a portion of sugar candy is placed under each skep as bee food. Shallow beechwood dishes with 3 carved feet are traditionally used for this purpose. The feet prevent the bees from gluing the dishes to the shelf with propolis and wax. By feeding the bees, the beekeeper tides them over the period of sparse foraging before the fruit blossom is in full swing. He prevents the stocks from being delayed in their early spring development. If food were in short supply, the bees would build fewer brood cells and thus interfere with the queen's egg-laying activity. The covering cloths are removed and will not be needed again until the skeps are taken back home. There's an agreement between beekeepers and fruit growers that the stocks migrate to the Alter Land in time for the first flowering, which is the sweet cherry blossom. A fortnight later, the sour cherries are in full bloom. Pollen is collected into the pollen baskets on the bees' hind legs. The protein-rich pollen grains are used in rearing the already numerous brood in the skep, and thus help to promote the growth of the colony. The sugary nectar yielded by the blossoms is the source of energy for the bees in the skep. When the sour cherry blossom is over, the last blossoms to be worked by the bees in the Alter Land are pear and apple. In mature orchards, these trees are planted in long rows, often alternating with one another. The small migration stands are distributed all over the orchard area. The fruit growers are keen to get the trees pollinated as thoroughly as possible. Once a week, the beekeeper inspects the stocks in the migration stands. When a colony has developed vigorously, the bees begin to build large cells at the lower edge of the comb for the drones to be reared in. In order to encourage the bees to enlarge the brood nest for the workers instead, the beekeeper cuts out most of the so-called drone comb. For this purpose, he uses a special instrument with a blade and hook known as a drone knife. The pieces of comb removed in this operation are collected for melting down to wax at a later date. In the course of these inspections, the beekeeper pays special attention to the size and food reserves of his stocks. In good years, when the bees have lots of natural food, some of the sticky candy remains behind on the feeding dish. In years like this, the colony develops at a rapid rate, and the first queen cells signal the colony's readiness to swarm. A premature queen cell is being removed here as well. If the beekeeper discovers a particularly weak stock while cutting off drone combs, he can promote its development by placing the skep where a highly vigorous stock in the same brood-rearing state has stood up to now. As the foraging bees always return to their accustomed location, this enables the beekeeper to equalize his stocks. The bees remain in the Alterland for 3 to 4 weeks. Their pollination activities are so important for the fruit harvest that the local fruit growers pay a fee for every stock that is placed in the orchards, whereas the beekeeper is interested in the rich early nectar and pollen yield for his colonies. So, fruit growing and beekeeping go hand in hand.